Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council building on Centauri Prime. The walls were made of smooth white stone that seemed to glow with its own light. Around him, dozens of alien beings moved through the corridors. Some walked on two legs like humans, others floated in the air, and a few moved on many legs across the polished floor. Jake looked different from everyone else in the building. His face was marked with old scars from his years on the frontier worlds. His hands were rough and calloused from hard work. The expensive diplomatic clothes he wore could not hide the fact that he came from one of humanity's most dangerous colonies. He had been born on Kepler 442b, a world where the gravity was twice as strong as Earth's. The air was thin and poisonous. Storms swept across the surface every few weeks. Most people who went to Kepler 442b died within their first year. Jake had lived there for 23 years before joining the diplomatic service. Now he served as Earth's senior ambassador to the Galactic Council. For the past 15 years, he had worked to keep peace between humanity and the other species in the galaxy. He was good at his job. People trusted him because he always kept his word and never backed down from a fight when it was necessary. Today was different. Today everything had changed. Lisa Hayes walked up to him carrying a data pad. She was his aide and had worked with him for 5 years. Lisa came from Mars Colony, which was considered a safe and comfortable place compared to the frontier worlds. She had learned to read Jake's moods better than anyone else. "The emergency session is about to begin," she said quietly. "All the major species representatives are here. The Andromedans, the Tau Ceti Republic, the Helix Federation, and the others." Jake nodded, but did not speak. His jaw was tight and his eyes were cold. Lisa had seen him angry before, but never like this. There was something dangerous in the way he stood, like a predator waiting to strike. The great doors to the council chamber opened with a soft hiss. Jake walked inside, his boots making sharp sounds on the marble floor. The chamber was huge, with seats arranged in a circle around a central platform. Each species had their own section designed for their specific needs. Council Speaker Velix floated above the center platform. The Andromedan looked like a jellyfish made of blue light, with long tentacles that moved slowly through the air. Velix had been the council speaker for over 40 years and was known for his calm approach to solving problems. "We gather today to discuss a most serious matter," Velix announced. His voice came from speakers built into the chamber wall since Andromedans communicated through electrical signals. 3 days ago, the Zephyrian Empire attacked and destroyed New Haven Colony. 15,000 human civilians were killed. A wave of shocked sounds came from around the chamber. Some species clicked their claws, others made low humming noises, and a few stamped their feet. The destruction of an entire colony was almost unheard of in the modern galaxy. Jake remained silent in his seat. He had already seen the reports. He had watched the recorded messages from New Haven Colony as the Zephyrian fleet appeared in their system. He had heard the desperate calls for help as the orbital bombardment began. He had seen the aftermath when rescue ships finally arrived to find nothing but burned earth and twisted metal. High Castellan Zex Thara rose from the Zephyrian section. The alien stood 8 feet tall on 4 powerful legs. His body was covered in dark purple scales, and 2 sets of arms moved as he spoke. Large yellow eyes looked around the chamber with what humans might mistake for confidence. "The Terran colony was harboring weapons of mass destruction," Zexathara said in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "Our intelligence services confirmed that the humans were preparing to launch attacks against peaceful Zephyrian worlds. We acted in self-defense according to galactic law." Jake's hands slowly curled into fists. He knew this was a lie. He had helped write the original peace treaty between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire 93 years ago. He understood how the Zephyrians thought and how they operated. They did not attack because they felt threatened. They attacked because they thought humans were weak. The Zephyrian Empire controlled over 200 star systems and had the largest military fleet in the galaxy. They had been expanding their territory for centuries, always finding excuses to take what they wanted. The peace treaty with humanity had been one of the few things that stopped their expansion in the Outer Rim territories. "Do you have evidence of these weapons?" asked Ambassador Quill from the Tau Ceti Republic. The small gray alien leaned forward in his chair, his large black eyes focused on Zexthara. Our evidence was destroyed when we eliminated the threat, the Zephyrian replied smoothly. But I assure you that our actions were necessary for galactic security. Jake stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at him. The human ambassador was known for his careful words and measured responses. He rarely spoke in anger and never made threats he could not keep. High Castellan, Jake said in a voice that carried clearly through the chamber. Are you telling this council that 15,000 human farmers, miners, and their families were preparing to attack the Zephyrian Empire? Yes, Zexthara replied without hesitation. Your species has always been violent and unpredictable. We simply acted before you could strike first. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the usual background sounds of the building system seemed to fade away. Lisa Hayes felt her heart start beating faster as she watched her superior's face. Jake. Morrison had spent his entire life fighting to survive on worlds that tried to kill him every day. He had negotiated with pirates, warlords, and hostile alien species. He had kept the peace for 15 years through patience, wisdom, and the unspoken understanding that crossing humanity came with a price. Now the Zephyrian Empire had crossed that line. They had killed civilians under the protection of a treaty that Jake himself had helped create. Worse, they were lying about it to justify their actions. New Haven Colony had a population of farmers and miners, Jake said slowly. They grew food and extracted minerals. Their heaviest weapons were mining charges used to break up rocks. They had no military presence, no weapons factories, and no ability to threaten anyone. So you claim, Zexthara replied with what might have been a smile. But humans are known for their deception. Jake took a step forward. The movement was small, but somehow it seemed to fill the entire chamber with tension. Other species representatives shifted nervously in their seats. They had heard stories about humans from the frontier worlds, about their strength and their refusal to back down from any fight. The peace treaty signed in 2157 specifically protects civilian colonies, Jake continued. Article 7 clearly states that no military action can be taken against non-military targets without proof of hostile intent. Where is your proof? I have told you our proof was destroyed, Zexthara said, but now there was a slight edge to his voice. Jake nodded, slowly. I see. How convenient. The two beings stared at each other across the chamber. One was a diplomat who had spent decades building bridges between species. The other was a military commander who believed strength was the only language that mattered. Council, Speaker Velix floated down between them. Perhaps we should recess and allow tempers to cool, he suggested. An excellent idea, Jake said without taking his eyes off the Zephyrian. I need to make some calls. As the session broke up and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Lisa Hayes approached her superior. Jake, what are you thinking? He looked at her with eyes that seemed older than they had been an hour ago. I'm thinking that some people only understand one kind of diplomacy, he said quietly. And it's time they got a lesson in what that looks like. Jake Morrison walked through the empty corridors of the diplomatic wing. Most of the other ambassadors had gone back to their quarters after the emergency session. The halls were quiet except for the soft hum of the building's air systems. Lisa Hayes followed a few steps behind him. She had worked with Jake for 5 years but had never seen him like this. His movements were different now. Instead of the calm, measured walk of a diplomat, he moved like someone hunting prey. Where are we going? She asked. To have a private conversation, Jake replied without turning around. One that should have happened a long time ago. They stopped at a door marked with Zephyrian symbols. Jake pressed the communication button and waited. After a moment, the door slid open to reveal High Castellan Zexthara's aide, a smaller Zephyrian with bright green scales. Ambassador Morrison, the aide said in heavily accented English. The High Castellan is not expecting visitors. Tell him I want to talk, Jake said simply. Alone. The aide looked nervous. Zephyrians were not used to being challenged, especially by species they considered inferior. But there was something in Jake's voice that made argument seem dangerous. A few minutes later, Jake sat across from Zexithara in a private meeting room. The chamber was sealed and soundproof, designed for sensitive diplomatic conversations. Jake had requested that all recording devices be turned off. This was going to be the kind of talk that never appeared in official records. "What do you want, human?" Zexithara asked. He was trying to sound bored, but Jake could see the tension in the alien's posture. Jake placed a small device on the table between them. It was a personal recording unit, the kind diplomats use to keep private notes. He pressed a button and a red light began blinking. "I want the truth," Jake said. "Not the lies you told the council. The real reason you attacked New Haven Colony." Zexithara laughed. The sound was harsh and grating like metal scraping against stone. "You think I fear your little recording device? You think anyone cares about your protests?" "I think you made a mistake," Jake replied calmly. "A big one." The Zephyrian leaned back in his chair, his forearms spread wide in a gesture that showed his confidence. "Your species has been living in peace for too long. You have forgotten what real power looks like. The Zephyrian Empire controls 200 systems. Our fleet is the strongest in the galaxy. What can your little colonies do against us?" Jake nodded slowly. "So this was never about weapons of mass destruction?" "Of course not," Zexithara said with another laugh. "Your farmers could not threaten a cargo ship, much less our empire, but they were in our way." "In your way of what?" "Expansion. The outer, rim territories have resources we need. Your colonies sit on some of the richest mineral deposits in the galaxy. We tried to buy you out legally, but your people refused to sell." Jake's eyes grew colder. "So you decided to take what you wanted by force." "We took what was always ours by right," Zexithara corrected. "The strong take from the weak. That is the way of the universe. Your species will learn this lesson, one colony at a time." The recording device continued to blink red between them. Every word was being captured and stored. Jake had what he needed, but he was not finished yet. "How many more colonies are you planning to attack?" he asked. Zexithara smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. 3 more within the next month. Maybe 4 if your government continues to resist. We will keep destroying your settlements until you surrender the territories we want." Jake stood up slowly. The movement seemed casual, but there was something predatory about it. Zexithara had spent his entire life as a military commander, but suddenly he felt like prey being stalked by a hunter. "You think this is funny?" Jake asked quietly. "I think your species is weak," Zexithara replied. "You talk about peace and cooperation, but when challenged, you do nothing. You will file protests and make speeches while we burn your worlds." Jake picked up the recording device and put it in his pocket. "Thank you for being so honest. It makes what comes next much easier." "What comes next?" Jake looked at the Zephyrian with eyes that had seen too much death and violence. "You wanted to see what we look like when we stop being diplomatic. You are about to find out." He walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "One more thing. You said humans have been living in peace for too long. You are right about that. But peace was a choice we made, not a weakness we had. We chose to be civilized because we remember what we were like before." "And what were you like before?" "Survivors," Jake said simply. "People who turned worlds that kill everything into homes. People who learned to fight in places where the air itself tries to poison you and the ground tries to crush you. People who never learned how to give up." The door slid shut behind him with a soft hiss. Zexithara stared at the closed door for a long moment. For the first time in his life, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Jake walked quickly through the corridors toward the communication center. Lisa Hayes had to almost run to keep up with him. "Jake, what are you doing?" she asked. "My job," he replied. "Just not the way most people expect." They reached the secure communication room used by Earth's diplomatic mission. Jake activated the emergency encryption protocols and opened a direct channel to Earth. The transmission would be routed through 3 different relay stations to prevent interception. Kate Williams appeared on the screen a few minutes later. She was the director of colonial defense, responsible for protecting human settlements throughout the galaxy. Kate had served in the military for 20 years before taking the civilian position. "Jake, I heard about New Haven," she said immediately. "How bad is it?" "All 15,000 dead," Jake replied. "But that is not the worst part. I just spoke with their commander. They are planning to hit 3 more colonies within the month." Kate's face went pale. "Do you have proof?" Jake held up the recording device. "Every word. And Kate, there is something else. The Zephyrians think we are weak. They think we will not fight back. What do you want me to do?" Jake was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was completely calm. "Activate the Deathworld Protocol." Kate's eyes went wide. The Deathworld Protocol was a classified contingency plan that had been developed years ago but never used. It was designed for exactly this situation when diplomacy failed and humanity needed to remind the galaxy why they called their worlds death worlds. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Once we start this, there is no going back." "They crossed the line first," Jake said. "They killed civilians and bragged about it. They plan to kill more. The time for half measures is over." Kate nodded slowly. "I will need authorization from the President and the Colonial Council. You will have it within the hour," Jake promised. "I am sending you the recording now. When they hear what the Zephyrians really think of us, they will give you whatever authority you need." The transmission ended, and Jake sat back in his chair. Lisa Hayes stared at him with a mixture of fear and admiration. "What is the Deathworld Protocol?" she asked. Jake looked at her with tired eyes. "Something we hoped we would never have to use. A reminder that humans did not become a spacefaring species by being nice to our neighbors. We did it by learning to survive in places that should have killed us all." He stood up and walked toward the door. "Contact Admiral Steve Carter on the UES Defiance. Tell him to prepare his fleet for immediate deployment, then send a message to every human colony commander in the Outer Rim territories." "What should the message say?" Jake paused at the door. "Tell them the gloves are off. Tell them to remember where they came from and what they learned growing up on worlds that tried to kill them every day. Tell them it is time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders really look like when someone threatens their families." The door closed behind him, leaving Lisa alone with the communication equipment. She began typing the messages that would change everything. In a few hours, the Zephyrian Empire would discover that they had made the worst mistake in their species' history. They had awakened something that humanity had kept carefully hidden for decades. They had reminded the children of Deathworlds what it felt like to be truly angry. The emergency signals reached every human colony at the same time. From the ice mining stations of Europa to the volcanic forges of Io, from the deep space platforms orbiting dead stars to the underground cities carved into asteroid belts. The message was clear and simple. The Deathworld Protocol was active. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Steve Carter read the classified orders that had just arrived from Earth. His weathered face showed no emotion as he processed the information, but his crew could see the change in his posture. The Admiral came from Titan Colony, where the methane storms could strip flesh from bone in seconds. "All hands, this is the Admiral," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We have new orders. Battle stations. Prepare for immediate hyperspace jump to the Zephyrian border." The bridge erupted into controlled activity. Officers moved quickly between stations, checking weapon systems and calculating jump coordinates. The Defiance was humanity's most advanced warship, but today it would not be fighting alone. Throughout human space, similar preparations were taking place. But these were not ordinary military vessels responding to the call. These were ships, crewed by people who had grown up in places where survival was never guaranteed. Captain Laura Martinez commanded the mining vessel Reaper's Edge in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Her ship was designed to extract precious metals from the cores of asteroids using industrial equipment that could cut through solid rock like butter. When the emergency signal arrived, she was deep inside a particularly rich asteroid, supervising the extraction of rare Earth elements. "Cut the mining operation," she ordered her crew. "Seal the hull and prepare for departure." Her first officer, Roy Patterson, looked at her with confusion. "Captain, we are in the middle of a 40 million credit extraction. The company will not be happy if we abandon it." Laura showed him the message on her personal communication device. Roy's eyes went wide as he read the classification level and the authorization codes. The Deathworld Protocol was something they had heard whispers about, but never thought they would see. "How long to retrofit the mining lasers for combat use?" Laura asked. Roy was already calculating in his head. The Reaper's Edge carried enough industrial firepower to hollow out an asteroid in hours. With some modifications, that same equipment could be devastating against enemy ships. 6 hours to recalibrate the targeting systems, he said. 12 hours to install additional power couplings. We can have her ready for combat in 18 hours. "Do it," Laura ordered, "and send a message to the other mining crews. Tell them to prepare for immediate departure. We have a war to fight." Similar conversations were happening across dozens of worlds. On Kepler 442b, where Jake Morrison had been born, Colonel Nancy Brooks received the emergency transmission while conducting training exercises with her planetary defense force. The world's crushing gravity and poisonous atmosphere had created soldiers who could fight in conditions that would kill most other humans. "How many ships can we mobilize?" she asked her staff. 15 heavy transports and 37 light fighters, replied her aide. "But Colonel, these are not military vessels. They are emergency evacuation ships and atmospheric patrol craft." Nancy smiled grimly. "They were built to operate in an atmosphere that dissolves metal and gravity that crushes bones. I think they can handle a fight in space." The true scale of humanity's response became clear when the ships began assembling at the rendezvous point, near the edge of Zephyrian space. Admiral Carter had expected to lead a small fleet of military vessels. Instead, he found himself commanding over 200 ships of every size and type. There were massive cargo haulers that had been converted into mobile weapons platforms. There were deep space tugs designed to move asteroids now equipped with kinetic bombardment systems. There were even passenger liners that had been hastily modified to carry troops and supplies, but it was the crews that made the difference. These were not regular military personnel following standard procedures. These were survivors from humanity's most dangerous colonies, people who had learned to fight in environments that would kill trained soldiers. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Carter opened a communication channel to all ships in the fleet. "This is Admiral Carter to all vessels," he announced. 3 days ago, the Zephyrian Empire murdered 15,000 human civilians in violation of every law of civilized warfare. They think we are weak. They think we will not fight back. Today, we prove them wrong. The response came back from dozens of ships at once, voices speaking in the accents of 100 different worlds, all saying the same thing. "Ready to fight, Admiral." The first battle took place at Zephyr Outpost 7, a military supply depot on the edge of Zephyrian space. The base was heavily defended with energy shields and automated weapon systems. The Zephyrian commander was confident that his fortifications could withstand any human attack. He had not counted on humans who treated vacuum like their natural environment. Captain Ellen Torres led the assault in her converted mining ship, the Frontier's Edge. Her vessel had been designed to operate in the empty space between stars, extracting resources from comets and dead planets. The crew had spent years working in conditions where a single mistake meant death. "Take us in close," she ordered her pilot. "These Zephyrians have never fought anyone who uses space as a weapon." The mining ship accelerated toward the station, at a speed that would have been suicidal for any other crew. At the last moment, Torres activated the ship's industrial manipulator arms, designed to grab and position massive chunks of rock. Instead of grabbing an asteroid, the arms seized one of the station's defensive platforms and crushed it like an empty can. "Hull breach on their port side," reported the sensor operator. "They are venting atmosphere." "Good," Torres replied. "Now let's show them what we do to rocks that do not cooperate." The mining lasers that had been designed to cut through solid stone made short work of the station's hull. Within minutes, the supposedly impregnable outpost was a floating wreck. The Zephyrian survivors sent desperate messages to their fleet command, but their reports seemed impossible to believe. Humans were not supposed to be able to fight like this. They were supposed to be weak and civilized. High Castellan Zexthera received the battle reports in his command center on the Zephyrian homeworld. The first few messages seemed like mistakes or cowards' lies. But as more reports came in, a pattern emerged that filled him with growing dread. The human fleet was not fighting like a military force. They were fighting like desperate survivors, who had learned to turn everything around them into a weapon. They used debris fields as cover, turned industrial equipment into instruments of war, and fought with a ferocity that his own troops could not match. "Contact the human ambassador," he ordered his communications officer. "Tell him I wish to negotiate." The reply came back within minutes. It was not from Jake Morrison, but from Admiral Carter himself. "The time for negotiation is over," the human said simply. "You wanted to see what monsters look like. Now you know." The transmission ended, leaving Zexathera staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff waited for orders, but he had none to give. The Zephyrian Empire had never faced an enemy like this before. They had attacked what they thought was a weak and peaceful species. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping for decades. They had reminded the children of Deathworlds what it felt like to be truly angry. And now they were going to learn why humans called their worlds Deathworlds. They were going to discover that the quiet, diplomatic species they had known was only one face of humanity. The other face was something far more dangerous. The survivors of 1,000 hostile worlds were coming for them, and they brought with them all the fury of people who had never learned how to surrender. The Zephyrian Empire's military might begin to crumble in ways no one had expected. Their massive battlecruisers, designed to fight other conventional fleets, proved helpless against humans who fought like they were still trying to survive on hostile worlds. Commander Chris Adams led a boarding party from the converted cargo ship New Horizon. His team had grown up on Hellscape, a planet where the surface temperature could melt lead and solar flares regularly destroyed all electronic equipment. They had learned to fight in environmental suits that could withstand radiation levels that would kill most aliens instantly. "Remember," Chris told his team as they prepared to cut through the hull of a Zephyrian destroyer, "these aliens have never fought anyone who treats their own ship like home territory." The boarding party used industrial cutting tools to slice through the enemy hull. They moved through the Zephyrian ship like hunters who knew every corner of their prey. The aliens had designed their vessels for their own biology, with wide corridors and high ceilings. To humans raised in cramped mining tunnels and underground shelters, it felt like fighting in a palace. The Zephyrian crew panicked when they realized the humans were inside their ship. They had trained for ship-to-ship combat, not for enemies who could appear anywhere within their own vessel. The humans moved through the artificial gravity and recycled air like they were walking through their own homes. Within 2 hours, the destroyer was under human control. The Zephyrian survivors huddled in their escape pods, staring at the humans who had taken their ship with a mixture of fear and disbelief. On Centauri Prime, Jake Morrison watched the battle reports with grim satisfaction. The Galactic Council had called another emergency session, but this time the atmosphere was very different. The other species representatives looked at the human ambassador with new respect and barely hidden fear. Ambassador Quill, from the Tau, SETI Republic, approached Jake during a break in the proceedings. The small gray alien seemed nervous as he spoke. "Ambassador Morrison, the Council is concerned about the scale of your response," he said quietly. "Many species are worried that this conflict could destabilize the entire galaxy." Jake looked at him with tired eyes. Where was this concern when the Zephyrians were murdering our civilians? Where was the Council when they bragged about planning to destroy more colonies? "We understand your anger," Quill replied. "But surely there must be a diplomatic solution." "There was," Jake said simply. "It was called the peace treaty they broke 3 days ago. Now they get to learn what happens when you cross a species that turns uninhabitable worlds into homes." The reports kept coming in from the front lines. The human fleet was not just winning battles, they were winning them in ways that shocked everyone who heard the details. These were not victories achieved through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They were victories won by people who had learned to survive in places where everything tried to kill them. Captain Laura Martinez and her mining crew had discovered that Zephyrian ships were not built to withstand the kind of damage that could be inflicted by industrial equipment. Her mining lasers cut through their hulls like they were made of paper. Her cargo manipulators could crush their weapon systems with ease. Their ships are built for fighting other ships, she explained to Admiral Carter during a strategy meeting. They have never faced anyone who treats their vessels like obstacles to be removed. The psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical damage. The Zephyrian Empire had built their entire culture around the belief that they were the strongest species in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire populations. They had never faced an enemy that could match their ferocity. Now they were fighting humans who had grown up in environments that would have killed Zephyrian soldiers within minutes. These humans did not just fight to win battles. They fought like people who had never learned how to lose. Dr. Helen Parker, humanity's chief xenobiologist, provided Jake with detailed intelligence about Zephyrian psychology from her research station on Earth. Her reports, originally written to help diplomats understand alien cultures, now became weapons in a different kind of war. Zephyrians are pack hunters, she explained during a secure communication. Their entire society is based on hierarchy and dominance. When they meet an enemy they cannot dominate, their morale collapses quickly. Jake forwarded this information to Admiral Carter and the fleet commanders. Within hours, human forces began using psychological warfare tactics designed specifically to exploit Zephyrian weaknesses. They broadcast recordings of Zephyrian officers surrendering. They showed footage of human crews working calmly in the vacuum of space, while Zephyrian survivors huddled in their escape pods. The message was clear. Humans were not just winning, they were winning easily. High Castellan Zexathara found himself in a position he had never experienced before. For the first time in his military career, he was losing a war. His forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had dismissed as weak and primitive. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked his aide during a briefing in his command. "Bunker. 43 destroyed, 27 captured, and 16 disabled," the aide replied nervously. "The humans are not just defeating our forces, they are taking our ships intact and using them against us." Zexathara stared at the tactical display showing the current state of the war. Red markers indicated Zephyrian losses, while blue markers showed human positions. The blue was advancing steadily toward the Zephyrian homeworld. "What about our allies?" he asked. "Have the Helix Federation or the Draconian Empire offered assistance?" The aide looked uncomfortable. "They have all declined to intervene. The Galactic Council has declared this a bilateral conflict and ordered all other species to remain neutral." Zexathara understood what this really meant. The other species were afraid. They had watched the human fleet destroy Zephyrian forces with apparent ease, and they did not want to risk becoming the next target. "Contact the human fleet," he ordered. "Tell them I wish to negotiate a ceasefire." The reply came from Admiral Carter within minutes. "The time for negotiation ended when you murdered 15,000 civilians. Surrender unconditionally or we will come to your homeworld and finish this war." Zexathara felt something he had never experienced before. Genuine fear. He had built his entire career on the belief that the Zephyrian Empire was invincible. Now, he was facing the possibility that his own species might be destroyed by enemies he had underestimated. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Carter studied the tactical reports with his senior officers. The human fleet had grown to over 300 ships as more volunteers arrived from the frontier colonies. They were closing in on the Zephyrian homeworld, and the enemy seemed to have no way to stop them. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "we are receiving surrender requests from 17 different Zephyrian commanders. They are asking for terms." Carter looked at the star map showing their current position. They were only 2 days from Zephyr Prime, the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. Once they reached the homeworld, the war would be over. "Tell them all the same thing," he said. "Unconditional surrender, war crimes trials for everyone involved in the New Haven massacre, full reparations for the families of the victims, and permanent human monitoring stations throughout their territory." "And if they refuse?" Carter looked at the tactical display, showing the firepower under his command. Mining lasers that could cut through solid rock, industrial manipulators that could crush battle cruisers, cargo ships converted into mobile fortresses, all crewed by people who had learned to fight in places where the air itself was poisonous. Then we finish what they started, he said simply, and we make sure the galaxy remembers what happens when someone breaks faith with humanity. The message went out to every Zephyrian commander, every government official, and every military base in the Empire. The humans were no longer asking for justice. They were demanding it, and they had the power to take it by force if necessary. The children of the Deathworlds were coming home to roost, and they brought with them all the fury of people who had never learned how to surrender. The siege of Zephyr Prime began not with bombs or missiles, but with silence. The human fleet surrounded the Zephyrian homeworld, like a net made of steel and fury. Admiral Steve Carter had learned something important during his years commanding ships in the Outer Rim territories. Sometimes the most effective weapon was patience. All ships maintain position, he ordered from the bridge of the UES Defiance. No ship enters or leaves the system without our permission. The blockade was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of massive military vessels arranged in formation, the human fleet looked like a collection of industrial ships that had wandered into the wrong place. But appearances were deceiving. These converted mining ships and cargo haulers had already proven they could destroy the Zephyrian military. Captain Ellen Torres commanded the mining vessel Frontier's Edge at the outer edge of the blockade. Her ship had been designed to work alone in deep space for months at a time, extracting resources from dead comets and asteroids. Now those same survival systems allowed her crew to maintain their position indefinitely. Captain, her sensor operator, reported, "We have 3 Zephyrian cargo ships trying to break through the blockade at coordinates 77 Mark IV. Ellen smiled grimly. "Send them a message. Tell them to turn around and go home. If they refuse, disable their engines with the mining lasers." The Zephyrian ships turned around. On the surface of Zephyr Prime, panic was beginning to spread through the population. The planet had never been attacked before. For over 3 centuries, the Zephyrian Empire had been the aggressor, taking what they wanted from weaker species. Now they were the ones under siege. High Castellan Zexthara sat in his command bunker, deep beneath the capital city. Around him, his staff tried to look busy while they waited for orders that never came. The truth was that Zexthara had no idea what to do. Every military strategy he had learned assumed that Zephyrians would be the ones doing the attacking. "Sir," his communications officer said nervously, "we are receiving another surrender demand from the human fleet." Zexthara looked at the message on his screen. The terms had not changed. Unconditional surrender, war crimes trials, full reparations, permanent human monitoring stations throughout Zephyrian space. "What about our defense fleet?" he asked his military aide. "Gone, sir. The last ship surrendered 6 hours ago rather than face the human mining crews." Zexthara closed his eyes and tried to think. 3 weeks ago, he had been a powerful military commander in the strongest empire in the galaxy. Now he was trapped, on his own homeworld, surrounded by enemies he had dismissed as weak and primitive. The psychological warfare was working exactly as Dr. Helen Parker had predicted. The Zephyrian military, built on concepts of dominance and superiority, could not function when faced with an enemy they could not intimidate. Jake Morrison received hourly reports from the fleet while he remained on Centauri Prime. The Galactic Council was meeting in permanent session now, trying to understand how the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted so dramatically in just 3 weeks. "Ambassador," Council Speaker Velik said during a private meeting, "the Council is prepared to mediate a peaceful solution to this conflict." Jake looked at the floating jellyfish-like alien with cold eyes. Where was this mediation when the Zephyrians were planning to destroy 3 more human colonies? Where was the Council's concern for peace when they were bragging about murdering our civilians? "We understand your anger," Velix replied. "But surely you do not intend to destroy an entire civilization." "We intend to get justice," Jake said, simply. "The Zephyrians will pay for what they did to New Haven Colony. They will stand trial for their war crimes, and they will never again have the power to threaten innocent civilians." The alien representatives exchanged nervous glances. They were beginning to understand that the quiet, diplomatic humans they had known for decades were only one face of humanity. The other face was something far more dangerous. On Zephyr Prime, the situation was becoming desperate. Food supplies were running low as the human blockade prevented any cargo ships from reaching the planet. The civilian population was demanding answers from their government. Zexathera finally made the decision he had been avoiding for days. He ordered his communications officer to open a direct channel to the human fleet. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the screen a few minutes later. The human looked tired but determined. Behind him, the bridge of his ship hummed with quiet activity. "Hi, Castellan," Carter said without emotion. "Are you ready to surrender?" "I want to negotiate terms," Zexathera replied. "The terms were sent to you days ago. Unconditional surrender, full accountability for your war crimes, complete reparations for the families you murdered." "You are asking us to destroy our own civilization," Zexathera protested. Carter leaned forward in his chair. "You destroyed 15,000 innocent lives. You bragged about planning to destroy more. You called us weak and primitive. Now you discover what we are really like when someone threatens our families." "We made a mistake," Zexathera admitted. "We underestimated your species." "Yes, you did," Carter agreed. "You thought peace meant weakness. You thought civilization meant we had forgotten how to fight. You were wrong about both." The transmission paused as Zexathera struggled to find words. Finally, he spoke again. "What guarantee do we have that you will not destroy us after we surrender?" Carter's expression softened slightly. "Humans do not murder civilians for sport. We are not like you. Surrender now. Face justice for your crimes and your people will live. Continue to resist and we will finish what you started." The communication ended, leaving Zexathera staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff waited for his decision. Outside the bunker, the Zephyrian people waited to learn their fate. 3 hours later, the surrender came. Not just from Zexathera, but from every Zephyrian military commander, every government official, and every planetary governor in the Empire. The message was broadcast across all frequencies throughout Zephyrian space. "This is High Castellan Zexathera of the Zephyrian Empire. We surrender unconditionally to the human forces. All Zephyrian military units are ordered to stand down immediately. We accept responsibility for our actions and submit to human justice." On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Carter watched as Zephyrian ships across the system powered down their weapons and activated their surrender beacons. The war was over. Jake Morrison arrived at Zephyr Prime 2 days later aboard a diplomatic transport. The peace negotiations took place aboard the UES Defiance, with representatives from the Galactic Council observing the proceedings. The final treaty was harsh but fair. The Zephyrian Empire would pay full reparations to the families of New Haven Colony. Every military officer involved in the massacre would stand trial for war crimes. Human monitoring stations would be established throughout Zephyrian space to prevent future aggression. Most importantly, the Zephyrian Empire would be broken up into smaller, democratic governments that could never again threaten their neighbors. As Jake signed the treaty, he thought about the 15,000 people who had died at New Haven Colony. Their deaths had been avenged, but the cost had been enormous. The galaxy would never again see humanity as a peaceful, harmless species. Was it worth it? Lisa Hayes asked him as they prepared to return to Centauri Prime. Jake looked out at the stars through the ship's viewport. Somewhere out there, human colonies were safe because the galaxy now understood what happened when someone threatened humanity's families. The people of New Haven Colony deserved justice, he said quietly. And sometimes justice can only be achieved through strength. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity's centuries of peaceful coexistence had been a choice, not a weakness. When that choice was taken away, the children of the Deathworlds remembered who they really were. They were survivors, they were fighters, and they never forgot their debts.